In the early afternoon, a sanctuary worker walks down a narrow trail covered in dry leaves. In a backpack on his shoulders, a German Shepherd puppy sleeps, unaware he's been left to fate. 3 adult tigers wait in a quiet, isolated enclosure. Without making a sound, the man opens the gate and places the pup in the center of the yard. Behind the trees, a monkey watches without blinking. As he walks away, the worker locks the door and disappears into the forest. Inside the enclosure, the puppy wakes up to 3 pairs of eyes staring at him. For a second, no one breathes. Love animal stories? Then subscribe now and don't miss a thing. Thanks for following along. Now, back to our story. The misty morning light filtered through the trees at Wildwood Sanctuary, nestled in the remote mountains of Montana. Ellie Parker wiped the sweat from her brow as she made her final rounds, checking on the rescued animals that had found refuge in this hidden paradise she had built over the past decade. The sanctuary had become her life's purpose after leaving her high-profile veterinary practice in New York. Here, surrounded by nature and creatures who needed her help, she had found peace. As she approached the tiger enclosure, she could hear the familiar rumble of Savannah, the oldest of her 3 rescued Bengal tigers. The majestic cats had been rescued from an illegal exotic animal breeding operation in Texas 3 years ago, and under Ellie's care, they had flourished. Savannah's sisters, Maya and Dakota, lounged in the morning sun, their striped coats gleaming, gold and black against the verdant grass. "Good morning, ladies," Ellie called out, reaching for the bucket of meat she had prepared. The tigers acknowledged her with low chuffs, a sound of recognition and affection that always warmed her heart. Her assistant, Tyler Rhodes, jogged up behind her, slightly out of breath. His tall frame and perpetually disheveled brown hair made him look younger than his 30 years. "Ellie, you need to come quick," he said, anxiety edging his voice. "Jackson just called. There's been an accident on Highway 12. Ellie's heart sank. Highway accidents usually meant wildlife casualties. What happened? "A German Shepherd pregnant. She was hit trying to cross the road. Jackson said she didn't make it, but..." Tyler paused, catching his breath. "They think they can save the puppies if we hurry." Without hesitation, Ellie handed Tyler the feeding bucket. "Take care of the girls. I'll get my kit and meet Jackson there." 20 minutes later, Ellie's truck skidded to a halt on the gravel shoulder of Highway 12. Jackson Miller, the local wildlife ranger and Ellie's longtime friend, was kneeling beside a still form on the roadside. His weathered face, usually stoic, showed signs of distress as he worked. "She was gone before I got here," Jackson said without looking up, "but I can feel movement. We need to work fast." Ellie didn't need to be told twice. With practiced hands, she assisted Jackson in the emergency procedure to save the unborn puppies. The minutes stretched like hours as they worked in grim silence. Finally, a tiny, wet nose emerged, followed by a small, furry body. One by one, they delivered 6 puppies, but only one showed signs of life, a small male with distinctive markings that suggested he would grow into a handsome, strong German Shepherd. "He's a fighter," Jackson murmured, as Ellie worked to stimulate the tiny pup's breathing. "Reminds me of someone I know." He gave Ellie a meaningful look. Back at the sanctuary, Ellie set up an incubator in her cabin for the orphaned puppy. She knew his chances weren't great without his mother, but she was determined to give him every opportunity to survive. She named him Scout after the character in her favorite book, a symbol of innocence and courage in a complex world. For 3 days, Ellie barely slept, feeding Scout every 2 hours with a special formula. On the 4th morning, as she was preparing his feeding, she heard an unusual commotion from the tiger enclosure. Savannah was pacing restlessly, making sounds Ellie had never heard before. Not aggressive, but insistent. Tyler appeared at the cabin door. Ellie, something's wrong with Savannah. She's acting strange, won't eat, keeps looking toward your cabin. Ellie frowned. Has the vet been out to see her? Dr. Reynolds checked her yesterday, said she's perfectly healthy physically. He thinks it might be behavioral. Curiosity getting the better of her, Ellie wrapped Scout in a soft blanket and carried him outside. As soon as she approached the tiger enclosure, Savannah stopped pacing and fixed her amber eyes on the bundle in Ellie's arms. The massive tiger made a soft rumbling sound in her throat and moved closer to the fence, her gaze never leaving the puppy. That's odd, Tyler said, watching the interaction with fascination. Ellie stood transfixed as Savannah continued to vocalize softly. She's talking to him, she whispered, hardly believing what she was seeing. That's crazy, Ellie, Tyler said, but there was uncertainty in his voice. Tigers and dogs are natural enemies. But Ellie knew what she was seeing. Savannah was showing maternal interest in Scout. As a veterinarian, she understood that maternal instincts could sometimes transcend species barriers, especially in captivity. She had read case studies, seen videos, but never witnessed it firsthand. An idea began to form in her mind. Radical, possibly dangerous, but potentially Scout's best chance at survival. Tyler, remember that article we read about cross-species? Adoption at the Sacramento Wildlife Preserve, the lioness who adopted the antelope calf. Tyler's eyes widened. You can't be serious. These are apex predators, Ellie. Savannah was hand-raised. She's never shown aggression towards smaller animals, Ellie argued. And Scout needs more than I can give him. He needs warmth, constant contact, proper socialization. This is insane, Tyler muttered. But Ellie could tell he was considering it. Tyler had always trusted her instincts when it came to animal behavior. It was why they worked so well together. That afternoon, after careful preparation and with Jackson standing by with a tranquilizer gun, just in case, he had insisted, Ellie entered the tiger enclosure with Scout cradled against her chest. Maya and Dakota watched from a distance, curious but not alarmed. Savannah approached slowly, her massive head level with Ellie's waist. Ellie's heart pounded in her chest as she knelt down, still holding Scout. "Easy, girl," she murmured. "Easy." Savannah lowered her head and sniffed the puppy gently. Scout, who had been sleeping, stirred and made a tiny whimpering sound. Instead of reacting with predatory interest, Savannah made a soft chuffing noise and licked the puppy with her rough tongue. A collective gasp came from Tyler and Jackson, who were watching tensely from outside the enclosure. Ellie felt tears spring to her eyes as Savannah continued to groom the puppy, treating him as if he were her own cub. When Ellie carefully placed Scout on a soft blanket on the ground, Savannah immediately curled her massive body around him protectively. Within minutes, Maya and Dakota approached cautiously, sniffing the new addition to their enclosure. Following Savannah's lead, they accepted the puppy without aggression, creating a protective circle around him. "I'll be damned," Jackson whispered, lowering his tranquilizer gun. "In all my years..." Ellie watched in wonder as Scout nestled contentedly against Savannah's warm belly. "Sometimes nature finds a way," she said softly. "Sometimes family isn't about blood or species, it's about connection." As the days turned into weeks, the unusual bond between Scout and his tiger mothers deepened. Under their care, the puppy thrived, growing stronger and more confident each day. Ellie monitored the situation closely, but her initial fears gradually subsided as she witnessed the tiger's gentle care of their adopted offspring. Word of the extraordinary adoption began to spread through the local community. At first, there were skeptics, those who warned Ellie that she was setting herself up for tragedy, that eventually the tiger's predatory instincts would override their maternal behavior. But as Scout continued to flourish under the care of Savannah, Maya, and Dakota, even the most doubtful began to reconsider. What none of them realized was that this unusual family would soon face challenges that would test the strength of their bond and change the future of Wildwood Sanctuary forever. And at the center of it all would be Scout, a German shepherd puppy who was learning to see the world through the eyes of a tiger. 6 months passed at Wildwood Sanctuary, transforming Scout from a helpless newborn into a robust, energetic puppy. His days were filled with extraordinary experiences unknown to other dogs. Under the watchful eyes of Savannah, Maya, and Dakota, Scout developed behaviors that blurred the line between canine and feline. Ellie stood at the observation platform. She had built specifically to monitor Scout's development, mesmerized by the scene below. Scout was attempting to stalk a butterfly, his body low to the ground, moving with a fluidity that mimicked his tiger mother's perfectly. When he pounced, his technique was unmistakably feline, though his execution remained decidedly puppy-like. All enthusiasm and little grace. "He thinks he's one of them," Tyler remarked, joining Ellie at the railing. "It's fascinating and a little heartbreaking at the same time." Ellie nodded, understanding the complex emotions. "He's developing a hybrid identity. I've been documenting everything for a research paper. There's never been a case study quite like this." Beyond the scientific interest, Scout had become the heart of Wildwood Sanctuary. Visitors who came to see the tigers now stayed for the German shepherd who thought he was a big cat. Children pressed their faces against the viewing glass, delighted by the sight of a dog playing with tigers, while their parents stood back in amazement. Scout's unusual upbringing manifested in distinctive behaviors. He had developed a deep, rumbling bark that sounded remarkably like the tiger's chuffing. He groomed himself meticulously like his mother's. When excited, he would pounce rather than run. But perhaps most striking was his fearlessness. Scout approached life with the confidence of a predator at the top of the food chain, despite his relatively small size compared to his mother's. As Scout grew, so did the challenges of managing this unprecedented situation. Ellie had initially planned to gradually integrate Scout with other dogs once he was old enough, hoping to balance his unusual upbringing with more species-appropriate socialization. But early attempts had proven difficult. Scout seemed confused and agitated around other dogs, failing to understand their social cues and play behaviors. "Maybe we should reconsider," Jackson suggested during one of his regular visits. "He's imprinted on the tigers. Trying to force him to be a normal dog might do more harm than good." Ellie sighed, watching Scout playfully bat at Dakota's tail. "But what happens when he's fully grown? The size difference alone will make their relationship complicated, and he needs to develop some connections with his own kind." The solution came unexpectedly. One rainy afternoon, Tyler arrived at the sanctuary with 3 bedraggled figures huddled in the back of his truck. A trio of German Shepherd mix puppies, soaked and frightened. "Found them abandoned by the river," Tyler explained as he helped Ellie bring the puppies inside. "Looked like someone just dumped them there." The puppies, 2 females and a male, were slightly younger than Scout, malnourished but otherwise healthy. After a veterinary check and some much-needed food and warmth, Ellie faced a decision. Normally, she would have arranged for them to go to a local shelter or foster home, as Wildwood primarily focused on wild and exotic animals. But looking at these German shepherds, so similar to Scout in appearance if not in behavior, she wondered if they might provide the bridge he needed between his tiger world and his canine heritage. "It's worth a try," she told Tyler. "But we'll need to introduce them carefully and separately from the tigers at first." The next morning, under controlled conditions with Jackson standing by, Ellie brought Scout to meet the newcomers in a neutral play area. She had prepared herself for various scenarios: aggression, fear, confusion, But what happened surprised everyone. Scout approached the puppies cautiously, sniffing the air. The three newcomers, whom Ellie had named River, Willow, and Aspen, watched him with equal curiosity. For several tense moments, the four dogs circled each other, communicating in subtle body language that Ellie could only partially interpret. Then, River, the boldest of the rescued puppies, play-bowed to Scout, a universal canine invitation. Scout tilted his head, clearly unfamiliar with the gesture. But after a moment of consideration, he mimicked the action, dropping his front quarters in an awkward approximation of a play-bow. "Look at that," Jackson whispered. "He's learning their language." Within minutes, all four dogs were engaged. In play, Scout occasionally reverting to tiger-like behaviors that momentarily confused his new companions. But remarkably, the other puppies began adopting some of his unusual moves, creating a hybrid play style that uniquely belonged to them. "They're teaching each other," Ellie realized, watching the interaction with growing excitement. "This could work better than I hoped." Over the following weeks, Ellie developed a careful integration plan. Scout still spent most of his time with his tiger mothers, but each day included canine socialization time with River, Willow, and Aspen. The three newcomers were housed in a specially built enclosure adjacent to the tiger habitat, allowing Scout to move between both worlds. The arrangement created an unexpected breakthrough. Rather than Scout being torn between two identities, he became a bridge between species. Soon, under Ellie's watchful supervision, carefully managed interactions between the tigers and the new puppies began. To everyone's amazement, Savannah, Maya, and Dakota accepted the newcomers with the same maternal tolerance they had shown. Scout, though with less intensity. "They're expanding their pride," Tyler observed as they watched Dakota gently groom Willow one afternoon. Scout showed them it was possible, and now they're redefining what family means to them. As the unusual, interspecies family grew stronger, Ellie realized that Wildwood Sanctuary was evolving into something truly unique, a place where conventional boundaries between species were being rewritten. Visitors began coming from neighboring states to witness the extraordinary family, and donations increased as people were moved by Scout's story. Not everyone was supportive, however. Dr. Lawrence Coleman, a prominent zoologist from the University of Montana, visited the sanctuary and left deeply concerned. "What you're doing here is irresponsible," he told Ellie bluntly. "You're interfering with natural behaviors and potentially creating dangerous situations. These are wild animals, not characters in a children's book." His criticism stung, but Ellie stood her ground. "With all due respect, Dr. Coleman, we're not forcing anything. Every interaction is natural and voluntary. We're simply providing space for these relationships to develop and documenting what happens." Coleman shook his head. "Nature has boundaries for a reason, Ms. Parker. When humans start erasing those lines, there are always consequences. Mark my words." He left with a promise to monitor the situation and file reports with relevant wildlife authorities if he saw evidence of animal welfare concerns. Ellie tried to dismiss his warnings, but they nagged at her conscience. Was she truly doing what was best for Scout and the tigers, or was she allowing her fascination with their unusual bond to cloud her professional judgment? Her doubts were temporarily silenced one evening when she witnessed a scene that defied conventional understanding of animal behavior. Scout had been practicing his hunting skills, stalking and pouncing on leaves blown by the wind. After several successful captures, he proudly carried a large maple leaf to Savannah, dropping it at her paws like an offering. The massive tiger sniffed the leaf, then gently nudged Scout with her head in what appeared to be approval. Scout responded with his unique bark chuff, then settled beside her, clearly pleased with himself. Maya and Dakota joined them, creating a tight family circle as the sun set over the Montana mountains. Watching them, Ellie felt a certainty that transcended scientific explanations. This unlikely family had found something precious, a connection that defied categorization. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was committed to protecting the space where love could flourish across the boundaries of species. What she couldn't know was that their greatest challenge was approaching, one that would test not only the bond between Scout and his tiger family, but also Ellie's deepest convictions about the sanctuary she had built and the animals she had sworn to protect. As winter gave way to spring at Wildwood Sanctuary, change hung in the air like the scent of wildflowers. Scout had grown into a magnificent adolescent dog, his coat gleaming and muscles rippling beneath his German Shepherd fur. At 10 months old, he moved with a grace that reflected his unique upbringing, part canine agility, part feline stealth. The morning dawned with an unusual energy. Savannah had been restless for days, separating herself from Maya and Dakota, seeking the most secluded corner of the spacious tiger habitat. Ellie had been monitoring her closely, suspecting what was coming. "I think today's the day," she told Tyler as they prepared the morning feeding. "She's showing all the signs." Tyler nodded, checking the special birthing area they had prepared weeks ago. "Everything's ready. Dr. Reynolds is on standby." They didn't have to wait long. By mid-morning, Savannah's labor had begun in earnest. Scout sensed the change immediately, pacing anxiously at the edge of the habitat, whining softly, as if he understood the significance of what was happening. Maya and Dakota kept a respectful distance, occasionally rumbling reassuringly toward their sister. After several tense hours, Ellie's suspicions were confirmed as Savannah successfully delivered 3 healthy tiger cubs, 2 females and 1 male. The births had gone smoothly, much to everyone's relief. As a rescued tiger who had been malnourished, in her early life, Savannah's pregnancy had carried higher risks. "They're perfect," Ellie whispered, observing through binoculars from a discreet distance. She had ensured that human interference was minimal, allowing Savannah to rely on her natural instincts. The real question now was how Scout would respond to the new additions. Would he see them as siblings or as strange interlopers? Would Savannah's maternal focus on her biological offspring diminish her bond with her adopted dog son? The answer came the following morning. Under careful supervision, Scout was allowed to approach the birthing den. He moved with uncharacteristic caution, his body language showing a mixture of curiosity and deference. Savannah watched him approach, her amber eyes alert but not aggressive. When Scout reached the edge of the nesting area, he lay down submissively, making a soft, whimpering sound. Savannah responded with a gentle chuff, then did something remarkable. She nudged one of the tiny cubs towards Scout, an unmistakable invitation. "She's introducing them," Ellie gasped, watching through the observation window. "She wants him to know their family." Over the next few weeks, a new dynamic emerged in the unusual household. Scout appointed himself protector of the cubs, keeping vigilant watch when Savannah needed to stretch or feed. He would lie beside the cubs, allowing them to crawl over him and tug at his ears, displaying infinite patience. As they grew stronger, he began teaching them games he had invented, a curious blend of canine fetch and feline pouncing. Ellie documented everything, her research journal filling with observations that defied conventional understanding of interspecies relationships. "Scout appears to have assumed the role of older brother," she wrote. "He demonstrates protective behaviors typically seen in adult male tigers, despite having no genetic relationship to the cubs. This suggests that bonding and family structures can transcend species barriers under the right conditions." Word of the expanding tiger dog family spread quickly, bringing A surge of media interest. National Geographic expressed interest in doing a feature, and several documentary filmmakers requested permission to visit. Ellie was selective about who she allowed access to, protective of the delicate balance they had established. Dr. Coleman also returned, his skepticism somewhat tempered by what he witnessed. "I still have reservations," he admitted, after observing Scout gently guiding a wandering cub back to Savannah. "But I can't deny that what's happening here is extraordinary. If you'll permit it, I'd like to bring some graduate students to study the dynamics. We could establish proper scientific protocols, collect data that might help us understand what makes this situation work when so many cross-species introductions fail." Ellie agreed cautiously, establishing strict guidelines for the research. As spring progressed into summer, Wildwood Sanctuary became a living laboratory, attracting scientists and animal behaviorists from across the country. The tiger cubs, named Luna, Nova, and Orion by public vote, grew rapidly, their personalities developing distinct characteristics. Luna, the oldest female, was bold and adventurous, often the first to try new things. Nova was more thoughtful, observing carefully before acting. Orion, the male, was playful and affectionate, forming an especially close bond with Scout. As the cubs grew, so did Ellie's concern about the future. The habitat, while spacious, would eventually become crowded. As the cubs matured into adult tigers, expanding the sanctuary would require significant funding, and despite the increased donations from Scout's fame, the financial situation remained precarious. "We need a long-term solution," she confided to Jackson one evening as they watched. Scout leading the cubs in what appeared to be a game of hide-and-seek. "These cubs will be full-grown in 2 years. We need more land, more facilities." Jackson nodded thoughtfully. "I might have an idea. The Morrison property adjacent to the sanctuary is coming up for sale. 300 acres, much of it perfect tiger habitat. Old Morrison passed away last month, and his kids want to sell. Quickly!" Ellie's heart raced at the possibility. "That would be perfect, but the price? $2 million, according to local gossip," Jackson said, confirming Ellie's fears. It was far beyond what the sanctuary could afford. The opportunity seemed destined to slip away until a visitor arrived unannounced one sunny afternoon. Cassandra Wellington stepped from a modest sedan, her simple attire belying her status as the heiress to one of Montana's oldest mining fortunes. In her 70s now, Cassandra had spent decades supporting wildlife conservation efforts across the globe. "I've been following your work from afar," she told Ellie after introducing herself. "This interspecies family you've nurtured, it's remarkable. But I understand you're facing challenges with expansion." Ellie gave her a guarded tour, explaining their situation. Cassandra watched Scout and the cubs with evident wonder, asking insightful questions about their care and development. "I'd like to help," she said finally. "The Morrison property. I could purchase it and donate it to the sanctuary with certain conditions." Ellie could hardly believe what she was hearing. "What kind of conditions?" "That you expand your mission. This sanctuary could become a center for interspecies studies, a place where we learn about the capacity for connection across traditional boundaries. The world needs such examples now, more than ever." Cassandra's eyes were bright with purpose. "And I want to establish an educational program here, bringing children to learn about conservation through the story of Scout and his family." The offer was everything Ellie could have hoped for, but it came with increased responsibility and scrutiny. "I'd need time to consider all the implications," she said honestly. Cassandra nodded approvingly. "Take the time you need. The offer stands." That night, as Ellie watched Scout curled protectively around the sleeping cubs, she reflected on how far they had come and the unexpected path ahead. The sanctuary was becoming something greater than she had ever envisioned, not just a haven for rescued animals, but a place that could challenge humanity's understanding of what was possible when artificial boundaries were removed. Her contemplation was interrupted by Tyler's urgent call. "Ellie, come quick! There's something wrong with Orion!" She rushed to the habitat to find the male cub lying listlessly, his breathing shallow. Savannah paced anxiously nearby, while Scout sat vigilant beside the cub, occasionally nudging him, gently as if trying to rouse him. "Call Dr. Reynolds," Ellie instructed, her mind racing through possible causes. "We need to get him to the medical building now." The next hours were a blur of activity as they carefully separated Orion from his mother and siblings. Scout refused to leave the cub's side, his distress evident in his whining and restless movement. Dr. Reynolds diagnosed a severe infection and began treatment immediately. "The next 24 hours will be critical," he told Ellie. "I've given him antibiotics, but his system is fighting hard." Throughout the night, Ellie and Tyler took turns monitoring Orion's condition. Scout remained steadfast, barely sleeping, his eyes rarely leaving the sick cub. Outside the medical building, Savannah continued her anxious pacing, occasionally calling out with low vocalizations that broke Ellie's heart. By morning, Orion's fever had broken and his breathing had stabilized. Dr. Reynolds was cautiously optimistic. "He's responding well to treatment. Young cubs have remarkable resilience." As Orion began his recovery, something extraordinary happened. Scout, who had been primarily raised by tigers but had developed connections with his canine companions, seemed to understand that his role was more important than ever. He became a bridge between the separated cub and his tiger family, spending time with Orion during treatment, then returning to Savannah, Luna, and Nova, carrying the scent between them, maintaining the family bond during their separation. "He's facilitating their connection," Dr. Coleman observed, witnessing Scout's behavior. "This goes beyond instinct. He's problem-solving in a way that suggests genuine emotional intelligence." After a week of treatment, Orion was strong enough to return to his mother and sisters. The reunion was emotional for all who witnessed it, Savannah carefully inspecting her cub, the sisters greeting their brother with gentle head bumps, and Scout prancing around them all with what could only be described as joy. As summer progressed, Cassandra's vision for an expanded sanctuary began to take shape. With the Morrison property secured, plans for new habitats and educational facilities were underway. Ellie found herself at the center of a growing movement, with Scout and his unusual family as living ambassadors for a new understanding of the animal world. What no one could anticipate was that their greatest challenge still lay ahead, a test that would push the boundaries of their unconventional family and reveal the true depth of the bond between a dog raised by tigers and the cubs he had come to see as his own. Autumn painted the Montana landscape in brilliant hues of gold and crimson. Wildwood Sanctuary was transforming, with construction underway on the newly acquired Morrison property. Ellie divided her time between overseeing the expansion and continuing her documentation of Scout and his unusual family. The tiger cubs had grown significantly, their playful antics requiring increasing space and stimulation. At 4 months old, they were testing boundaries and developing hunting skills, with Scout often at the center of their games. The German Shepherd, now fully grown at 15 months, had become an integral part of their development, demonstrating techniques that blended his canine abilities with the feline behaviors he had learned from his mothers. On a crisp October morning, Ellie sat with Cassandra Wellington on the observation deck, watching Scout lead the cubs in what appeared to be a stalking exercise. He would hide behind tall grass, then emerge with a perfectly executed pounce that the cubs would attempt to mimic with varying degrees of success. "He's teaching them," Cassandra remarked, her voice filled with wonder. "I've sponsored wildlife conservation projects around the world, but I've never seen anything quite like this." Ellie nodded, making notes in her research journal. He's created his own curriculum, combining what he learned from Savannah, Maya, and Dakota with his innate canine instincts. The cubs are developing a hybrid hunting style that incorporates both approaches. Cassandra's investment had breathed new life into the sanctuary. The educational center was nearly complete, with interactive exhibits designed to tell Scout's story and promote understanding of animal cognition and emotional bonds. School groups were already booking tours for the spring, and a waiting list of researchers hoping to study the interspecies family grew longer each week. The Morrison Creek area is perfect for the expanded tiger habitat, Ellie continued, pointing toward the eastern edge of the property. Natural barriers, varied terrain, a reliable water source. It will give them twice the space they have now. Their conversation was interrupted by Tyler's arrival, his expression unusually serious. "Ellie, we have a situation. Jackson just called. The state wildlife authorities found evidence of trapping on public land about 5 miles from our northern boundary." Ellie's stomach tightened. Illegal trapping had been an ongoing problem in the region, particularly as fur prices rose, and economic hardships pushed some locals toward poaching. "What kind of traps?" "Large snares, potentially dangerous to any wildlife. Jackson said they've removed 3 already, but they suspect there are more." Tyler hesitated. He's concerned because they found them close to the game trail that leads toward our property. Cassandra frowned. Could someone be deliberately targeting the sanctuary animals? "It's possible," Ellie admitted. "Not everyone is happy about the attention we've been getting. Some of the old-timers resent the restrictions that come with having a wildlife sanctuary nearby. They increased security immediately, adding patrols along the sanctuary boundaries and installing additional camera traps to monitor wildlife movement." Ellie also made the difficult decision to temporarily restrict the tigers' access to the northernmost section of their habitat, creating a buffer zone between them and any potential danger. The precautions seemed effective until 3 days later, a routine morning check revealed something alarming. Orion was missing from the tiger habitat. Savannah was agitated, pacing and calling, while Luna and Nova huddled together anxiously. Scout was nowhere to be seen. "When was the last confirmed sighting?" Ellie asked, trying to keep her voice steady, despite the panic rising in her chest. Tyler checked the overnight logs. Security camera caught all 3 cubs with Savannah at the drinking pool around 2 a.m. Scout was with them then. Everything looked normal. A sanctuary-wide search began immediately. Staff and volunteers combed every inch of the existing habitats, while Jackson and his ranger colleagues checked the perimeter fences for any signs of breach. Hours passed, with no sign of either Orion or Scout. Could they have somehow gotten into the construction area? Cassandra suggested, her face lined with worry. The team redirected their search to the Morrison property, where half-completed structures and building materials created numerous hiding places. As sunset approached, with still no sign of the missing animals, Ellie made the difficult decision to organize a search beyond sanctuary boundaries. "If they somehow got outside our fences, they could be anywhere by now," she told the gathered search team. "Scout would likely stay with Orion, trying to protect him. We need to focus on the game trails leading north, where those traps were found." The search party split into groups, armed with tranquilizer guns, not for Scout or Orion, but for protection against any aggressive wildlife they might encounter in the growing darkness. Ellie led one team, her heart heavy with worry and a gnawing sense of guilt. Had her expansion plans somehow created this situation? Had she failed in her responsibility to keep these animals safe? As night fell completely, their search was aided by thermal imaging equipment loaned by the local Forest Service. They moved slowly through the dense woods, calling softly for Scout, hoping his training would bring him to their voices. It was just past midnight when a faint sound caught Ellie's attention, not a bark or a roar, but a distressed whimpering that raised the hair on the back of her neck. She signaled to her team to stop and listen. "This way," she whispered, following the sound off the main trail and into a thicket of pine and aspen. The whimpering grew louder, occasionally punctuated by a distressed, muffled growl that Ellie immediately recognized as Orion's voice. They emerged into a small clearing and froze at the sight before them. Orion was caught in a large snare trap, the wire cutting into his hind leg. The young tiger was clearly in pain, but not panicking because Scout was with him, pressed against his side, occasionally licking his face in what appeared to be reassurance. "Don't move," Ellie cautioned her team. "Any sudden movements might scare them." She approached slowly, speaking in a calm, reassuring tone. "Scout, good boy, it's okay. We're here to help." Scout's ears perked up at her voice. He stood, positioning himself protectively between the approaching humans and the trapped tiger cub. His posture wasn't aggressive, but it sent a clear message. He was Orion's guardian, and he would not abandon his post. "He's been with him the whole time," Tyler whispered in awe. "He must have followed Orion when he wandered off, then stayed to protect him when he got trapped." Ellie knelt a few yards away, still talking softly to Scout. "Good boy, such a good boy. Let us help him now." After a tense moment, Scout's posture relaxed slightly. He stepped aside but remained close, watching intently as Ellie and the wildlife veterinarian who had accompanied the search party approached Orion. "The snare hasn't cut too deeply," the vet said after a careful examination. "We'll need to sedate him to remove it safely and treat the wound." Throughout the delicate procedure, Scout never left Orion's side. When the sedative took effect and the young tiger slumped unconscious, Scout became visibly distressed, whining and nudging Orion with his nose. Ellie had to gently restrain him, explaining in soothing tones that his friend would be okay. "The trap was set deliberately," Jackson concluded, examining the mechanism after it was removed. "This isn't a standard trapping configuration. Someone knew what they were doing, and they were targeting large predators." The realization sent a chill through Ellie. This wasn't random poaching. Someone had specifically placed traps where sanctuary animals might find them if they escaped the property. With Orion safely sedated and his wound treated, they prepared to transport him back to the sanctuary. Scout refused to be separated from the tiger cub, jumping into the transport vehicle and settling protectively beside the stretcher. "Let him stay with Orion," Ellie decided. "Their bond might be the best medicine right now." Dawn was breaking as they returned to Wildwood. News of the rescue spread quickly, and by mid-morning, local media had gathered at the sanctuary gates. The story of Scout's heroism, staying with the trapped tiger cub throughout the night, potentially saving him from more serious injury or from other predators, captivated the public imagination. While Orion recovered in the medical building, Scout maintained his vigilant watch. Savannah was allowed supervised visits, her relief evident in her body language when she saw her cub was safe. The way she acknowledged Scout, gently bumping her massive head against his, seemed to convey gratitude and recognition of his role in protecting her offspring. As video of the reunion circulated online, Scout's story went viral. Within days, the tale of the German Shepherd raised by tigers who had risked himself to save a tiger cub reached millions. Donations poured in, along with messages of support and admiration from around the world. Dr. Coleman, who had been documenting the family's behaviors for his research, was moved to reconsider many of his initial assumptions. What we're seeing here transcends simple imprinting or conditioned behavior, he told a gathering of colleagues who had come to witness the phenomenon firsthand. Scout made a choice, a moral choice, if you will, to stay with a vulnerable member of his family despite personal risk. This suggests a level of empathy and altruism that challenges our understanding of animal cognition. For Ellie, the incident crystallized something she had sensed from the beginning, but had struggled to articulate in scientific terms. The bonds formed at Wildwood weren't simply interesting behavioral anomalies to be studied and documented. They represented something more profound, a glimpse into the capacity for connection that existed beyond the boundaries humans had imposed on the natural world. As Orion recovered and was eventually reunited with his sisters and mother, Scout's status within the sanctuary evolved. He was no longer simply an unusual case study. He had become a symbol of what was possible when artificial barriers were removed and beings were allowed to form connections based on genuine affinity rather than species designation. What no one could have anticipated was how Scout's heroism would catapult Wildwood Sanctuary into the national spotlight, setting the stage for their greatest challenge yet, and for a revelation that would transform their understanding of what family truly means. Spring arrived at Wildwood Sanctuary with an explosion of new life. The expanded tiger habitat on the Gay Morrison property was finally complete, providing Savannah and her growing cubs with acres of natural terrain to explore. The educational center welcomed its first official visitors, and researchers from universities across the country arrived to study the unique interspecies relationships that had developed under Ellie's care. At the center of it all remained Scout, now approaching his second birthday. The German Shepherd had become something of a celebrity following his heroic rescue of Orion. A documentary team from National Geographic had spent the winter filming the unusual family, capturing footage that would soon introduce Scout's story to audiences worldwide. "We're calling it Boundaries of the Heart," the lead filmmaker Sofia Martinez told Ellie as they reviewed rough footage in the new visitor center. "It's already generating tremendous interest. The network wants to make it the centerpiece of their spring lineup." Ellie watched the screen with mixed emotions. The footage was stunning. Scout leading the now adolescent tiger cubs through a training exercise, the four of them moving in perfect synchronization despite their obvious physical differences. There were tender moments of Scout grooming Luna's face, of Orion playfully pouncing on the dog who had saved his life, of Savannah watching over them all with maternal contentment. "It's beautiful," Ellie acknowledged, "but I'm concerned about the increased attention. We've already had to hire additional security after the trapping incident." Sophia nodded, understanding. "We're being careful about specific locations and security details. The focus is on the emotional bonds, not on making Wildwood a tourist destination." The sanctuary had indeed been transformed by Scout's fame. Cassandra Wellington's initial investment had been supplemented by corporate sponsorships and a flood of private donations. The expanded facilities now included a state-of-the-art veterinary hospital, research laboratories, and educational programs that brought students from across the country to learn about conservation and animal cognition. Dr. Coleman had established a permanent research presence, bringing graduate students who conducted non-invasive studies of the interactions between Scout, the tigers, and the other sanctuary residents. Their published findings were challenging conventional understanding of interspecies relationships and sparking debate in academic circles. "We're seeing evidence of genuine emotional bonds that transcend species-typical behavior," Coleman explained during a presentation to visiting scientists. "Scout doesn't merely imitate tigers, He's developed a hybrid identity that incorporates aspects of both canine and feline behavior in a coherent whole. And the tigers, particularly Savannah and her cubs, have adapted their behaviors to accommodate his differences. Not everyone welcomed these developments. A vocal minority of traditional wildlife management experts criticized what they called the Disneyfication of wild animal behavior. Others raised concerns about the ethics of allowing such unusual relationships to develop, arguing that it compromised the natural instincts of the animals involved. These tensions came to a head when the Montana Wildlife Commission announced a review of Wildwood's operating license, citing concerns about non-standard practices and potential welfare issues. The news hit Ellie hard, despite Jackson's assurances that it was likely just bureaucratic procedure. "They can't ignore the success we've had," he reminded her. "Our rehabilitation rates are among the highest in the country, and the research coming out of Wildwood is groundbreaking." Still, the review cast a shadow over the sanctuary's future, creating an undercurrent of anxiety that persisted even as day-to-day operations continued. Ellie found herself second-guessing decisions she had made years ago, wondering if her instinct to allow Scout to be raised by tigers had been scientifically sound or merely emotionally driven. The uncertainty reached its peak the week before the commission's scheduled inspection. Ellie was working late in her office when Tyler burst in, his face flushed with excitement. "You need to come see this," he said, gesturing urgently. "Something's happening with Scout and the tigers." Ellie followed him to the observation area, overlooking the main tiger habitat. The scene below stopped her in her tracks. Scout was engaged in what appeared to be a deliberate, organized activity with all 3 tiger cubs. He would demonstrate a movement, a specific pouncing technique, and then stand back as Luna, Nova, and Orion attempted to replicate it. When they succeeded, Scout would make his unique bark chuff sound that seemed to signal approval. "He's teaching them," Tyler whispered, "systematically teaching them hunting skills." Dr. Coleman had arrived as well, alerted by one of his students. He stood transfixed, watching the interaction. "This is unprecedented," he murmured, filming with his phone. "This isn't random play or imitation. He's conducting a structured learning session." As they watched, the dynamic shifted. Orion demonstrated a stalking technique that Scout hadn't shown them, a move that was purely feline. Then, remarkably, Scout attempted to copy it, adjusting his canine physiology to approximate the tiger's movement. When he couldn't quite manage it, Orion seemed to simplify the motion, breaking it down into components that Scout could more easily replicate. "They're teaching each other," Ellie realized, her voice barely audible. "This is reciprocal learning, not just imprinting or conditioning." The implications were staggering. What they were witnessing suggested a level of cross-species communication and intentional knowledge sharing that had never been documented in cognitive science literature. It wasn't merely that Scout had adopted tiger behaviors or that the tigers tolerated a dog in their midst. They had developed a genuine cultural exchange, a community of practice that transcended species boundaries. Dr. Coleman was already on, his phone calling colleagues. "We need to document this systematically," he insisted. "This could revolutionize our understanding of animal cognition and social learning." The timing couldn't have been more perfect. When the Wildlife Commission representatives arrived 3 days later, they were greeted not just by Ellie and her staff, but by a contingent of respected wildlife biologists and cognitive scientists who had witnessed the remarkable interactions and could speak to their scientific significance. The inspection team was led by Director Margaret Whitfield, a stern woman with decades of experience in wildlife management. She made it clear from the outset that she had concerns about Wildwood's approaches. "Natural behaviors should be preserved, not modified for human entertainment," she stated as the tour began, wild animals are not pets or performers. Rather than becoming defensive, Ellie invited Director Whitfield to observe for herself. They spent the morning watching Scout and the tigers from unobtrusive observation points, with Dr. Coleman providing scientific context for what they were seeing. The turning point came when they witnessed Scout and Orion engaged in what appeared to be cooperative problem-solving. Ellie had designed enrichment puzzles that required different physical capabilities to solve, some favoring a dog's dexterity, others a tiger's strength. Working together, Scout and Orion approached these challenges as a team, each contributing their unique abilities to retrieve the food rewards hidden inside. "This isn't trained behavior," Dr. Coleman explained quietly. "We're seeing spontaneous cooperation based on mutual understanding of each other's strengths and limitations. In cognitive science terms, this suggests theory of mind, the ability to understand that others have different perspectives and capabilities from one's own." By the end of the day, Director Whitfield's demeanor had softened considerably. "I've spent 40 years working with wildlife," she admitted, as they concluded the inspection. "I came here expecting to find wild animals being coerced into unnatural behaviors for public entertainment. What I've seen instead is something quite extraordinary." Her official report, released 2 weeks later, not only renewed Wildwood's operating license, but specifically commended its innovative approaches to animal welfare and research. While maintaining appropriate boundaries between humans and wildlife, the report concluded, Wildwood Sanctuary has created an environment where interspecies relationships can develop naturally, providing unique insights into animal cognition and social behavior. The endorsement opened new doors. Universities began establishing formal research partnerships with the sanctuary. Conservation organizations worldwide requested guidance on applying Wildwood's methods to their own rehabilitation programs. Cassandra Wellington expanded her financial support, establishing an endowment that would ensure the sanctuary's future for generations to come. As summer approached, Ellie organized a special event, a festival celebrating the 1-year anniversary of Scout's heroic rescue of Orion. The sanctuary grounds were transformed with educational displays, interactive exhibits, and live demonstrations of the enrichment, activities that had proven so successful. Visitors from across the country gathered to learn about Wildwood's unique approach to conservation and to witness firsthand the remarkable family at its heart. Scout, now fully mature, moved with confidence among his tiger siblings, occasionally interacting with the canine pack that had become an integrated part of the sanctuary's social structure. During the festival's closing ceremony, Ellie stood before the assembled crowd, Scout sitting proudly at her side. Behind them, safely visible in their spacious habitat, Savannah and her nearly grown cubs lounged in the late afternoon sun. "What we've learned at Wildwood," Ellie told the attentive audience, "is that the boundaries we create between species often exist more in our minds than in nature. When we provide safe spaces for connections to form organically, we discover that the capacity for empathy, cooperation, and even love can transcend the limitations of biology." She rested her hand on Scout's head, feeling the steady presence of the dog who had bridged 2 worlds. Scout wasn't born knowing he was a dog or a tiger. He simply knew he was part of a family that accepted him as he was. And in that acceptance, he found the freedom to become something entirely unique, neither fully dog nor tiger, but a being defined by his connections rather than his species. As if on cue, Scout raised his head and made his distinctive sound. Part bark, part chuff, a vocalization that belonged to no known species, but perfectly expressed his singular identity. From their habitat, Savannah answered with a rumbling call of her own, a sound that transcended the barriers between them and affirmed the bond they shared. The documentary Boundaries of the Heart premiered the following month to critical acclaim and record viewership. Audiences around the world were moved by Scout's story and the larger message it conveyed about the possibilities that emerge when artificial boundaries are removed and beings are allowed to connect based on genuine affinity. Schools incorporated the documentary into their science curricula. Conservation organizations cited it when advocating for more holistic approaches to wildlife management. Philosophers and ethicists pointed to Scout and his tiger family as evidence that moral consideration should extend beyond traditional species. Hierarchies. For Ellie, the greatest reward was simply watching Scout living his extraordinary life, leading the cubs in play one moment, joining his canine companions for a run the next, moving seamlessly between worlds with a confidence that came from knowing exactly who he was, regardless of labels or expectations. On a perfect autumn evening, as golden light bathed the sanctuary and the first hints of cooler weather tinged the air, Ellie sat on her cabin porch with Tyler, Jackson, and Cassandra, watching Scout and the tigers in the distance. The German Shepherd was lying contentedly between Luna and Orion, while Nova playfully batted at fallen leaves nearby. Savannah surveyed her unusual family with evident satisfaction. "I remember when I thought I was saving Scout," Ellie mused, sipping her tea. "But the truth is, he saved all of us in different ways. He showed us what's possible when we let go of our preconceptions and allow authentic connections to form." Tyler nodded, his eyes on the peaceful scene. He created his own identity, his own way of being in the world, and in doing so, he created a space where others could do the same. "That's his gift to us," Cassandra added softly. "The reminder that family isn't defined by species or biology, but by the connections we forge and the care we show for one another." As the sun dipped below the mountains, casting long shadows across the sanctuary grounds, Scout rose and stretched, then led his tiger siblings in a joyful run along the perimeter of their habitat. Their movements were perfectly synchronized despite their different forms, a visual harmony that expressed the essence of what Wildwood had become. A place where differences were not merely tolerated but celebrated, where the boundaries between species dissolved in the face of deeper connections. And in that moment, watching Scout, neither fully dog nor tiger but gloriously, uniquely himself, Ellie understood that what had begun as an unlikely accident of circumstance had evolved into something profound, a living testament to the power of love to transcend boundaries and create new possibilities for connection in a world desperately in need of such examples. The story of Scout, the German Shepherd raised by tigers, would continue to unfold in ways no one could predict. But its central message had already taken root in the hearts of all who witnessed it, that the true measure of family lies not in shared DNA or species classification, but in the bonds we choose to honor and the love we extend across all boundaries. Dear listeners, we hope that Scout's extraordinary journey from orphaned puppy to bridge between worlds has touched your hearts. To continue this emotional adventure, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories that explore the boundaries of love and connection. Find it by clicking on the link to your left. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day, we bring you unique narratives that explore the complexity and beauty of life in all its forms. Don't miss our upcoming content, where we'll continue to share stories that challenge our understanding of what's possible when love knows no boundaries. We look forward to reading your thoughts and experiences in the comments below.